Episode 8. Wow, we have 8 episodes. In a space too far from anything to be nothing, a blue light shines into the void. Through the shadows, shapes appear. People, stories, wonders, and mysteries. Live from Elgin, Illinois at the Blue Box Cafe, it's Tales by the Blue Light. I'm your host, James Wilder. So, thank you. So every month on the show, we showcase a brand new sci-fi, horror, and fantasy story by me. And these stories come from all over time, space, and other realities. And they're all called here through this blue light. See, this light is a special one. It bends our world into a place where stories become real. A liminal space where our own dreams can take form. We glide between these realities, these possibilities, and we get stories. So that's what we do here, and we're excited to bring you what you have. But first, we have a special treat today. I have been practicing teaching unicorns to be completely silent in my spare time, and I thought you might appreciate hearing these invisible, majestic creatures' hard work finally paying off. So let's take a listen, shall we? Beautiful, isn't it? Those unicorns have really practiced. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. It turns out the unicorns are actually still on the bus over here. Well, that's embarrassing. How was I supposed to know the invisible silent unicorns hadn't arrived to not make any noise? Well, that's awkward. Anyways, it looks like I should go back to what I'm best at anyways. Pulling stories from the blue light here, across the stars and into your ears. So, let's start off by going 460 years into the future. Into a little science fiction story we're calling The Last of the American Girls. The man had already started tipping the box of American flags into the dumpster when Jennifer began to shout at him. He turned, seeing the woman flailing her arms in the air, a panic looked on her face. He lowered the box and wiped his brow. From the woman's buttons on his vest, he already knew what she wanted. "You can't just throw all that away," he sighed. "Yes, I can. We're getting rid of all this trash." It's not trash, she pointed down at the ground. It is the symbol of this land. He laughed, setting the box down. "Look, lady, ever since that whole business on Mars started, nobody here on Earth wants this revolutionary crap." She pointed at her chest. "I want it." "I know you do. You're the only person who's bought any in the last 6 months." He kicked the box. "Those flags, those American flags, they stand for nobody's an American, kid. We're all Centro, the worldwide corporation, have been for centuries. If you didn't notice, should get over it. Stop living in the past." She pursed her lips. She clearly wanted to shoot back a reply, but held it in. "How much?" "Huh? For the boxes, how much?" He crossed his arms, looking at her in the eyes. The blue sky and hot sun above them framed them gently. "You know what? You can just take it. You clearly want the stuff. You've shopped here all the time since you were a kid. Jennifer rushed forward and picked up the box. "Thank you so much, Mr. Ramirez. Just be careful, kid. You don't want people getting the wrong idea about why you want that." She just smiled at him and nodded. Looking down at the box of memorabilia to the former United States of America, she felt her heart flutter. She got weird looks as she walked to the monorail to go back to her parents' house in Oklahoma City. The eye of Devon Tower looking down on her. The Centro logo on it judging her as she walked. When she shut the door to her room, her arms aching from the frankly overstuffed box of American trinkets, she was greeted by the sound of sobbing. Turning to look at the couch, she saw her mom and dad on either side of her brother, each holding one of his hands. Nearby, 2 technicians in lab coats were checking their phones as they waited for the family to finish. Jason, her brother, was suited up to his neck in a skin-tight sensory input suit. She knew what this meant. She didn't want to know it. The box felt so much heavier suddenly. Her mother looked up at her, pulling in her lips, unable to form the words. "Jason." "What are you doing?" Jennifer said. He let go of their parents' hands and walked toward her. "Jen, I'm glad you're here." "Answer my question, Jason. What are you doing?" She set the box down on the coffee table and tried to hold back her tears. "I mean, look, isn't it obvious?" "Of course it's obvious, but I want you to say it." She pushed him lightly as she said it. She wanted him to look her in the eyes when he spoke, but instead he looked off to the other wall. I'm opting out, Jen. I'm signing up to be a permanent player in the other world. Jennifer closed her eyes, unable to keep the tears back. You idiot. We're never going to see you again. You're going to be stuck in that virtual world. Not unless you join the game. I don't want to join the game, she shot back. They're going to link you into their virtual world and you run around playing pretend till you die. He took a hold of her shoulders, his hands strangely cold with the rubber covering. Yeah, and I'll get free health care, free meals. I can have the kind of life we don't get in the real world. She shook her head. Don't do this, Jason. It's rash. I already signed the forms. She looked down at his rubbery feet. I see. I don't want our last conversation to be this angry. She tried her best to smile for him, even when the technicians put the rubbery hood over his head and he got up from the couch, opened the door, and ran out of the room without a word, seeing the world as something else entirely. Jennifer Nolan stared up at the ceiling of her room that night. She'd pinned a poster of America's founding fathers there. It was an old painting of them signing the Declaration of Independence from Great Britain. Now neither of those nations existed anymore. They'd been subsumed into Centro Systems, the worldwide corporation founded by Shiori Nakatomi. Now, so had her brother. She shut her eyes and rolled over. She tried to sleep, but her thoughts raced. She'd been born in the wrong century. Mr. President, Shiori Nakatomi said, sitting on his desk as he seemed to shrink before her. The United States was a failed dream, a failed experiment, a failed state, governed more by the passions of its powerful than the notions of a better future. All I'm asking you to do is sign this one little line, and it's all over. All the stress, all the failures. You'll be remembered not as the last president of the United States, but the first one to really do what's best for its people. Congress will still have to... Who cares about Congress? A Congress is just a group of weak people asked to make choices they have no right to. Who has the right, Mr. President? The great people do. The ones who have the strength to make the choices. Sign, Mr. President. Centro Systems is the future. Are you the future or a dead past? Most of the class was asleep. Jennifer was scowling. The movie was bad. She'd read the actual transcripts of Shiori's meeting with the final president of the USA, and it had not gone anything like that. She wanted to scream at the class that it was a fake, a hoax, propaganda. But she'd already done that last year, and no one had cared. She'd gotten taken to the office and yelled at, though. The fake movie president signed over to the United States, which was also historically inaccurate, since he spent 2 weeks thinking it over and actually did it after the Congress and Senate had voted for it, but that didn't fit the message of the movie. The music swelled. Outside the window, a group of opt-outs ran by, leaping over the benches outside the school like they were some dangerous trap. To them, they were. She wondered if one was her brother. You're right, said the fake president. Centro Systems is the future. The weekly meeting of the Children of Liberty was held every Saturday in a taco place in downtown Oklahoma City. Some of them dressed up as important figures from American history, though the number who were just guys in suits made it hard to figure out. Jennifer always wore the same thing, a t-shirt with a picture of Ulysses S. Grant and the words, I'll grant you that, under it, with a denim vest loaded with patches and buttons over it. Grant wasn't her favorite president, but her mom and both grandpas had all gotten her that shirt for Christmas last year, so she may as well use it. All I'm saying, Dave Brewster said, is that the country could have gone in a totally different direction then, and we would have stayed independent from Centro. Maxine Marsters shook her head. I mean, that election was a mess, sure, but I'm not sure Shiori would have found a way anyways. Jennifer set the box of American trinkets down on the tables, already loaded with tacos, and interrupted the chat. Freebies, everybody? Everyone jumped up, grabbing what they wanted from the box till it was picked clean. Where the heck did you get this stuff, Jen? The shop down the road, they were gonna throw it out. Maxine frowned. 'Cause of Mars? Jen nodded sadly. Yeah. Dave shook his head, picking up another lime wedge and squeezing it over his tacos. They're going to blame that sort of thing on people like us, Mars spent forever looking like they wanted to be a constitutional republic, and now they're socialists. They're a socialist constitutional republic now, Dave. He shrugged. Whatever, man. The main point is everyone who resists these days is trying to be like Grigory Tarkanovsky, trying to take down Centro Systems like he did with that stupid commie rebellion. Jen looked down at her eagle ring. I've been thinking, Dave, why don't we work with the other groups in the city? The Tarkanovskists, the Terra Martianists, the neo-monarchists. Dave and Maxine looked at each other. Jen, we don't work with them, and they don't work with each other because we have absolutely nothing in common, Maxine said. Except that we all hate Centro, Jen said. I don't hate Centro. I mean, I work for it, Dave said. Everyone works for Centro, you nitwit, Maxine said. That's what being a one-world government corporation means. You know what I mean, Dave growled. But, Jennifer gestured with her hands, trying to come up with the words. Nobody agrees on the same thing. That's what they want, right? I mean, we're all fractured. If we work together, maybe we could stand up to Centro, show them we still love America. And you know what? Then what? You know what they do at the centers? Oslo was... Maxine put her hand over her mouth. Jen frowned. No, I don't. What are you talking about? Dave sighed and pulled his phone out. He tapped a few things and a low buzzing started. If we're being recorded, it'll be fuzz. Jen's eyes went wide. That can't be legal. Centro is an unjust, unlawful, and tyrannical government, Dave belted out. I thought you said... Yeah, I said that before I turned on this thing. That means they can't listen to me. Jen looked between them. What happened in Oslo? Protests. Huge protests. I'm not surprised you haven't heard about them. People died. Centro just pretends it never happened. Jennifer put her hands over her mouth. There's a resistance. A resistance to Centro. You should know that. You listed off all the other groups in OKC. She shrugged. I thought all they did was also get tacos and stuff. Well, for the most part. Not always tacos, but, occasionally someone does something. But Dave's right. They won't work with us, and frankly, we won't work with them. America was against communism, and let me tell you, a lot of them are communist. Jennifer looked between the two adults. So what's all this for? Are we just play-acting American history? Of course not, Dave said. When the second American Revolution comes, we'll be ready. But when is that going to come? Things aren't good here. There aren't jobs. People keep opting out. Cowards, Dave said. Jen scowled. They aren't cowards. We're not doing anything ourselves. Maxine took her hand patronizingly. Look, Jen, I remember when I was your age. I was angry. The system is unfair, but we have to wait for the right time. Centro owns most of the solar system. We can't win. But we can, defy them. Show them we aren't afraid, Jen said. Dave shook his head. Look, kid, you come up with a plan, run it by the group. Maybe we'll consider it. But we can resist just by surviving to pass on American ideals. Jen nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. The botanical gardens downtown were a favorite place of Jen's to hang out alone. She liked watching the little artificial streams of water that flowed around the plants. She downloaded Dave's Fuzz app and turned it on and off, as if she had anybody to have a secret conversation with. A group of opt-outs ran by, and she flicked the app on. Two of them kept running, but the last one stopped, confused. They stumbled, disoriented, before they got out of the fuzz. I'm having a malfunction, she heard one of them say into the rubber suit. As they got far enough away, though, the virtual world they ran through must have reappeared because they began running again. Jen looked down at her phone. She had an idea. That's crazy, Maxine replied. You can't be serious, Dave said. I'm 100% serious. Think about it. The opt-outs are controlled by what quests they do in the game they're playing. They get signals telling them where to go and what to do. All we have to do is change where they're supposed to go or do and interrupt their signal. The pair looked at each other and back at Jen. What do you think all of this will accomplish, Jen? It'll show the world we're still resisting, still fighting. We have to do something. No, we don't, actually, Dave replied. We really don't have to do anything. You're young, Jen, and you're enthusiastic, and those are good qualities, but you can't just solve the world's problems by taking a stand. Jen crossed her arms. So you're just giving up. We're not giving up, Maxine said. We're being reasonable. Jen scoffed. I've about had it here with being reasonable. Where's that gotten us? Where's politely sitting in a taco place every week ever gotten us? Absolutely nowhere. We can meet in public because we're nothing. We're not important. We're not scary. We're not frightening. We just eat tacos and talk about our favorite presidents. That's what the club is, Jen. The club's about, America. Dave rubbed his head. America's gone, Jen. Jen looked between the two of them and with her face stony, walked out of the restaurant. Jen fiddled with the app. She'd been learning coding in her spare time in the last few weeks, but this was difficult. The app could easily stop the opt-outs from getting a signal, but she was sure she could make it put something into their signal. She pressed a button on her phone and looked up at it. She wondered if her latest experiment was working. That was when the door burst down. 2 soldiers with guns barged into her room, and a man in a silver coat followed. Jennifer Nolan. You are hereby under arrest by Central Systems for conspiring against the corporate good. If you come quietly, you will not be harmed. Jen dropped her phone, screaming, and put her hands over her head. My name is Dirk Agent Marcus Fealty. You're coming with us now. As they dragged her out, they threw items for her room into her bag and took it with them. They threw her in the back of a van and cuffed her. The van started moving, and Jennifer tried not to think about where they were going. Whatever you were planning, I'm glad we caught you. Your compatriots will be rewarded handsomely, I'm sure, and you can at least take some solace in knowing that your friends in the America Club won't suffer for your mistakes. By throwing you under the bus, they've gained some amnesty. Jen looked at her shoes. I was on Mars during the revolution there. We didn't crack hard enough on people like you. Young people tired of the way things were. We should have been harder from the start. Saved us a lot of grief. Sir? Someone yelled from the front of the van. There are people heading us off. Fealty shut his mouth and scampered to the front of the van. What the hell? Those are opt-outs. Jen looked at the bag. Her phone was in it. She grinned. The opt-outs swarmed the van, ripping open the doors and throwing Marcus and his goons to the ground. Quest completed. Princess, one said, we're here to save you. Jen stepped out of the van onto the sandy ground. Thank you, but I think our work here is not done yet. She looked out back towards the city. It was time to grow up. Thank you. All right, so as I said at the beginning, I'm James Weiler, and this is Tales by the Blue Light. So I come here every month from Indianapolis, Indiana, to bring you guys some stories. And it's a long journey, so if you feel like leaving me a tip, you can go over to my writer table where I have my books laid out from the event earlier today and give them to this lovely woman over here. Rebecca. All right. So let's then, now that I've gotten that little bit out the way, let's keep going with the stories. It looks like we're getting another signal here through the blue light. This one appears to be coming from, as always, an abandoned missile silo in the middle of nowhere, Utah. It's Monster Hunter Monthly. Let's get the signal tuned in. And hi, everyone. I'm Magpie Jones, and this is once again Monster Hunter Monthly. Today we're going to be talking to you about trolls. Now, trolls used to just live under bridges, and they were easy enough for monster hunters like you to appease. So you just walk over the bridge, toss a chicken leg or something over the side, and the trolls would be satisfied. However, these days, trolls have taken to this place called the internet and have managed their national food supply over from chicken to human grief, which, let me tell you, is pretty silly because chicken is pretty cheap over at the grocery store, and there are a lot more bridges than there used to be. So now, trolls seem to be primarily living in basements now, where they pose as humans and try to get humans to be upset. More troubling, these trolls have unwittingly required some humans into their ranks to do work for them, which is actually even more pathetic, come to think of it. So if you encounter a troll these days, just walk into their house and steal their router. It's pretty effective. All right, so now let's check in on our reader mail. Okay, hi Magpie. This is Lori from Fall Springs. Hi, Lori. All right, I was wondering, why exactly are there so many monsters that want to eat people? Why don't they just eat a deer or something? That's a great question, Lori. The main problem with monsters hunting deer as opposed to humans is the intelligence factor. Deer, after all, would never be unintelligent enough to put the world at risk of nuclear annihilation because they don't like brown people. So humans are just way easier to trick. After all, you can just point at a human and go, hey, don't like that other human, and they'll ignore you while you actively start to eat them. So humans are pretty easy prey. I hope that one answered your question. And next we have a letter from Scared in Mexico, Indiana. Hi, Magpie. Accidentally fed a friend of mine a lot of garlic, but it turned out he was a vampire and burst into flames. How can I make an adequate apology? Ooh. Well, you could start by putting your friend out if you have not done that already. After that, try making some blood brownies for your friend. You know, vampires love brownies and vampires love blood, so that'll go a long way till it's helping to heal your divide. Good luck. So that's all for us here this month. Till next time, don't die. All right. Oh, so we have something a little different coming here through the blue light. We've got a report from, of all things, your local Taco Bell. There's a line of cars at the Taco Bell. You saw them there the last time you drove by. And when you drove by again on the way back, they were still there. But they were not new cars that had simply gotten into line later. They are the same cars. They never left. They have been there for years, which is probably why you have never gone to that particular Taco Bell, come to think of it. When they first got into line, the cars were simply excited to get their grande value meals and to drink Baja Blast Mountain Dew. But being in line so long has consequences. The occupants of the cars, unable to leave, have begun to craft their own society in the parking lot. The purple van has become a school, and the line's children are apparently excelling in the sciences. Calls for a sports team to be formed to compete with other local schools were squashed, however, when it was correctly pointed out that that would require the people of Taco Bell to leave and drive somewhere else, which was impossible because they were trapped in line at Taco Bell. In a recent election, the owner of the blue Ford Taurus recently beat out the Impala for mayor of the line, but they have come in during a troubled time. Our reports show that the Taco Bell might in fact be serving the waiting customers their ordered food soon. This has caused panic in the line. After all, their way of life is on the line. Some, however, said that waiting in line for 17 years was slightly longer than they planned, and they will actually be glad to get what they came there to order, whatever it was. However, some residents are demanding that they be allowed to stay in their spot in line till they die, citing big government interfering in their lives. In reply, the owner of the Taco Bell simply said, I only just bought this place. It's been closed for the last 2 decades, so I'm not sure why there's a line here, actually. More on this as it develops. All right. So, now to get to our second main piece of the day, we have a little fantasy story we're calling Unrestrained. Taplock tapped the front toe wheel of his left foot rollerblade against the metal floor of the helicopter. It was that odd steel that had the little triangle patterns on it. Why did it always have the little triangles? It never made sense to him. Was it cheaper to just put little globular triangles on top of metal floors? Geez, it must cost a fortune drizzling triangles, and if China existed, there would probably be some old dude who specialized just in drizzling them. As it was, Taplock was on that stupidly patterned floor, holding onto the grip line fiercely, holding his katana limply in the other hand. It was dangerous wearing the rollerblades on the helicopter rides. Trace and Vector usually only put theirs on right before they made the jump, and Taplock had seen many a man roll right out of the helicopter doors when he lost his footing. But the whole point was to make the jump anyways. Jumping out of helicopters was the only way to fight the dinosaurs, obviously. As it were, they were nearing one now. It stomped the ground lazily, sending shockwaves through the cartoonishly serene underbrush, sending bunnies, rabbits, hares, and other small dinos rushing for other underbrush. Taplock shifted his jaw as he watched the critters. They really weren't that bright, were they? Then again, neither was the T-Rex he was about to jump onto, all piles of muscles fabricated by nature to make up in some way for the fact that the creature's brain was rivaled in size by peas, jelly beans, and the intelligence of potted plants and economic commentators. It was still muscular, though. And like anyone who went to a public school knows, that makes a lot of people suck up to you. Taplock took in a deep breath. The air was so heavily oxygenated it practically made him high, but he was getting more and more used to it the more he jumped. His red mesh shorts billowed in the wind. His black turtleneck sweater didn't really. I mean, it's a turtleneck. He stretched his jaw to check on the strap, and his metal Vietnam-era G-High helmet was tight enough. He got a satisfactory resistance. His rollerblades wobbled forward and backward. It'd be time soon. Taplock, hey, why do we do this? What? I mean, why do we jump out of helicopters and fight dinosaurs? I mean, isn't this kind of ridiculous? Why don't we, have guns or something? I mean, Trace, seriously, you should hear yourself. You sound so stupid right now. Why do we jump out of helicopters and fight dinosaurs? He mimicked in his best whiny baby voice, which was exactly what Trace was. I mean, really, what do you expect us to do? Shoot rockets at the dinosaurs or something? Are you crazy? Are you smoking something illegal? I mean, do you really think we have a government in a world where we're fighting dinosaurs? Shut up, Trace. You didn't answer my question. Look, whatever. Why are we wearing rollerblades? I mean, couldn't we have shoes or tanks or something? Taplock turned around, shaking his head. The nerve of him. That didn't even deserve an answer. What kind of ridiculous crap was he spewing to not wear rollerblades? Weirdo. Here we are, lock tap. The pilot's voice came over the vintage 1980s walkie-talkie. I hear you, Jackalope. Preparing for jump. They were now close enough he could see the T-Rex's tiny eyes. He wondered briefly if the size of a critter's eyes in proportion to its body was any indicator of its intelligence. Trace had tiny eyes, and that would certainly explain all those dumb questions. He couldn't let that bother him now, not with this much on the line. Taking a deep breath, Taplock let it out slowly and imagined himself riding a giant polar bear across a field of frozen mugs just ready to be filled with root beer. This had nothing to do with the rest of the story, but it calmed him down nonetheless. Opening his eyes, he readied his hand to do the same. Once the helicopter got over the T-Rex's head, it would be time. It was still tromping around, roaring and thrashing his tail and bashing trees down for no reason. Damn thing must hate the logging industry. The helicopter moved closer. Taplock slid back with his skates so the grip line was stretching to hold him. He waited. The green-skinned beast stepped closer. The rotors whirred. The damn thing just looked up. No one had ever survived an all-out fight with a T-Rex. Usually they just jumped from the helicopter and landed a carefully timed blow into its brains with a katana, then skated down its back as it toppled, usually jumping off the last minute and landing in a cool pose. But as it lurched forward, quicker than the several stories of flesh should have, Taplock knew that wouldn't work this time. The Rex was trying to bite the helicopter down, and it was going to. At this angle, Taplock couldn't make a landing on the top of his head. He'd have to jump. Now, or everyone would die. It wasn't so much a choice as a reflex. He let go of the cord and skated forward, swinging the katana into a two-handed back grip, and then his feet were outside the chopper. There was a single moment where if you'd been positioned at the right spot in the air, you could see Taplock leaping out from the chopper, teeth gritting, stabbing downwards to the giant gaping jaw of the T-Rex, lips pulled back from the teeth, tongue out just in case to catch him. The helicopter trying to veer away in a panic, the passengers looking stunned as Taplock threw through the air. Then it all happened very fast. A slash appeared on the Rex's mouth. It reared its face away, howling. A damp thud sound hit the ground. The chopper moved to a safe distance. Taplock was landed in a crouch, his sword embedded into the earth in front of him. He got up and nipped the sword from the soil. There in front of him, like a spited god, stood a massive bleeding monster. The cut went from its nose to its chin, and it was dripping, droplets that made huge noises upon impact. They stared each other down for a moment. Naturally, as the dramatic tension was appropriate, it began to rain. A few droplets at first, splattering off his sword and clothes and making pleasant plinks off his helmet. He wheeled his left foot back a little. The T-Rex took a step forward. The rain began in earnest. It was time. Taplock bolted forward, building up speed as the wheels on his feet spun faster and faster. He moved like a hornet, hovering back and forth across the same stretch as he charged. The Rex moved its head back and forth, watching him lazily. He was almost within range. It furrowed its brows as if recognizing the fact that it had strained its education. Sadly, due to overly zealous libertarians in the area, the T-Rex had no formal education and couldn't even spell its own name, which was Tyrannicus. After the zigzagging form came close enough, a brilliant idea came to Tyrannicus's mind. Instead of biting forward, he came at Taplock from the side. This is a brilliant idea, an idea that Rexes everywhere would have studied for centuries if they had a language. It was, however, an idea Taplock had thought of when he was 2. As the Rex's mouth veered into where Taplock would be, Taplock backskated. He almost came to a stop, then actually went backwards, then turned and charged again. Tyrannicus kept charging his face into where Taplock had been, confused as to why there was no meat he hadn't eaten yet. Taplock sprinted, his legs pumping, mud splattering his legs, and built up enough speed to make a leap. The Rex's left eye only barely noticed he was there before he delivered a slash right through its iris. The colors that had filled up the eye, yellow, green, blue, black, white, were suddenly overrun by a surprise influx of red. Tyrannicus screamed at the heavens, blinking his eye, trying to get it to work. It hurt really bad, and he couldn't see. Tyrannicus wasn't the brightest being alive, but he knew an eye not working was probably a bad thing. Probably. Well, he was sort of sure. There was something hanging out of his eyelid. He could feel it. His stubby arms were reaching up to try to scratch it off, but nothing came of that, mainly because he couldn't reach that high with his arms. He felt something glide across his skin like a very smooth insect, and he shook his head to try to get it off. He felt the thing slide around, but stay on. Damn thing, he thought, vaguely. After a few moments, he forgot he'd been fighting and kept walking and roaring, confused as to why everything on his right side was so much more exciting. Then all of a sudden, there was a sharp pain, and nothing existed, for which Tyrannicus wasn't so much of a change, he realized, and oddly felt ennui for the first time and final time in his existence. Taplock has raised the sword in the halo of the setting sun and slammed it down. He skated down the dying beast's back and did a triple spin in the air as he jumped off its back. Now he knelt in the mud, watching the dead beast's body get pelted by rain. It wasn't the exciting feeling he remembered. It wasn't the same noble cause, jumping from helicopters to kill roving dinosaurs. People died doing this, and so did the dinosaurs. The huge green corpse stretched out in front of him. Some Archaeopteryxes and crows were already starting to fight over the meat. He could hear the helicopter landing behind him. People were cheering. He tightened his grip and the katana's hilt. What was this joy for? Just because he'd fought a T-Rex and lived to tell the tale wasn't so grand an adventure. He got up and clomped his rollerblades through the mud towards the chopper. It wasn't so grand. That was amazing! How did you manage to trick it? I saw its head go like, and you cut it, like, oh, you'll look fine. And tried to bite you? I mean, you dodged that? Not a scratch. It's a miracle. I mean, first time ever. I know it. Mighty proud of you, boy. Taplock sat in his chair and strapped in. He hugged the sword close to its chest and watched the mud drip from his feet. Just shut up, everybody. Shut up. Thank you. Today's episode of Tales by the Blue Art was brought to you by the color ochre. Ochre doesn't actually have anything to say about itself. It's just a color and can't speak, so you'll have to take its word that it's cool. All right, so today we're really excited. We have a special guest here. It's Lord Friends, Dark Overlord of the Mizzulian Space Empire. He's with us today. He's come all the way from the Andromeda Galaxy to talk to us, so let's give him a warm welcome.
You fool! You've fallen into my trap!
I have?
Ha 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 ha! Only a fool would know what a trap is when he saw it.
I can't see your trap, actually. I really don't know what you're talking about.
Ha! There isn't a trap. That was the trap. I trapped you. Trappity, trappity, trap, trap, trap.
It sounds actually now like whenever I say anything, you're just saying how you knew what I was going to say, and so you get to act super clever. It's kind of silly.
Ha! It's not silly.
It kind of is. Aren't you like a galactic warlord?
Indeed I am. I have conquered 20 solar systems.
By conquer, do you think you conquered me when you did that gotcha thing?
No comment.
Oh my god. That is what you meant, isn't it? You haven't taken over any solar systems?
I've taken over one.
Really?
I said, people who submit to my tyrannical rule say what? Really fast.
And they said what?
And I became their ruler.
For how long?
That's not fair to ask.
Come on, how long?
Maybe 15.49 minutes. Not that I was counting.
Oh, okay, we're done here. Lord Friends, everybody.
But I'm not done. I am powerful.
Yeah, next up, we have another tale for you. This one, a little horror piece we're calling The Noise. All the people say they can hear the clanging on, but I have never been able to. The sound is supposed to be uproarious, sending people running into their sheds to cover their ears, but all I hear is the wind. So I walk alone through the streets of our town, kicking garbage in a solitary game of soccer. I usually have about an hour till the supposed sound dies down, so I make the most of it. You can't be dumb about what you do during the sound, but as long as you go and you do all the risky things first, you'll usually be fine and no one will catch you. Panicked people will leave their doors open or at least forget to lock them, so I can usually get a free meal by nabbing a few things from different houses. I never take enough from any one house or take anything important enough that I'd be suspected. The people of the town hate the noise, but they're also grateful for it. In a way, after all, it keeps the soldiers away most of the time. They march through the town sometimes, but never on days when the noise is. They always march to the dark tower past the wasteland and never come back. They never tell us who they are. We never ask. Sometimes they take someone, though. They come in with rifles drawn and pull them away towards the tower. Sometimes they stagger back, bleary-eyed and jittery, unsure of where they've been. Sometimes that's the last we see of them. But they never come for me, and I never hear the noise. On the worst days, I imagine it's all some sort of prank because I cannot hear the noise at all. They're all pretending, going somewhere without me. But I've gone in with them a few times and watched them shriek on the floor, watched the parents struggling through the pain to hold their children down as they thrash. I help for a time, but it's nothing I can truly do to help, and they began to resent seeing me not suffer while they were. Everyone was happier when I stayed out of their way, so I do, and I watch the tower. Normandy, what do you think's in the tower? Verdun asked me. I don't know, I replied. I've always wondered, but I've been afraid to make the trek across the wasteland. She nodded and sipped her hot broth. I heard Berlin tried to go over there. I shot a look over at her. I didn't hear about that. It's why he was gone during the Barley Festival. He tried to walk to the tower, but as he got closer, the noise got louder. He said he had seizures on the ground, and the sky opened up, and a shining being came down towards him. I rubbed my hands, trying to keep warm in the eternally chilly air. So he lost his marbles. She shrugged. I've always wondered if God lived in the tower. She pulled her legs up to her chest, adjusting her hand-sewn dress as she did so. Wait, I think I've heard that name before. Not sure where. Is God important, right? She looked around us. We were sitting on a rock on the edge of town. The only person in sight was York, who was throwing feed out to her chickens. Verdun gestured for me to slide down the rock to her where no one could see us, and I did so. She then slid something out from under her dress. It was a book, but not any book I'd ever seen. After all, I'd read all the books. There were only 10 books, after all. This one was new, or rather new to me, because it was clearly very, very old. She pressed it into my hand, and I began to read it. 10 Steps to Getting a Closer Relationship with God by Nigel Chadwick. I looked up at her. A whole book about being better friends with one person? How important can they be? She shrugged. I read the whole thing. Frankly, I'm still confused. They talk a lot about how God's a good father. Good for him and all, but I'm not sure how that actually helps me. I've already got one. I don't know. I think this God guy might adopt people or something. I skimmed through it. Step 7, trust that God will be there and he will. I screwed my lips up. Well, I don't even know this guy, so I can't expect that. This Nigel fellow seems to really admire him, though. Verdun nodded. Look how old the book is, though. God can't still be around. This book's ancient. Where did you get this, anyway? One of the soldiers dropped it when they were marching through the town to the tower. It fell out of their bag while they were, marching, and they didn't notice. The soldiers have their own books. I wonder if they also have 10 books. Verdun shrugged. That makes sense to me. But, you can't tell anyone about this, right? I placed my hand over my heart. Promise. It was a week later when the noise didn't stop. It felt longer than it usually was, but when I timed it, the longest it ever was 3.5 hours, usually much shorter than that, around an hour. But this time the noise started, and when 4 hours passed, no one had come out. I went in to check on them, walking into the shelter. They were still huddling, screaming. Seizures were happening to a few of them. I left. More hours passed. It continued. 12 hours passed. I went down into the shelter. An old woman was foaming at the mouth, a young man trying to help her even as he tried to keep his hands from shaking. A man stood up and collapsed on the floor. I ran to them, tried to do what I could, but the noise continued. It was not about to stop. It was not about to let up. I was horrified by what I saw. So I stood up and walked back to the town square. The tower loomed in the distance. I remembered what Verdun had said, that Berlin had tried to walk to the tower, but the noise had stopped him. I'd been afraid to walk to the tower, but I knew now that I had no choice. If I could stop what was happening to the rest of the town, it was my duty. So I grabbed some food and supplies from nearby houses, threw it in a bag, and began to hike towards the tower. They call the land between the town and the tower the wasteland, and it is a perfect term for that space. It's filled with nothingness, dead plants and dead animals that escaped from the farms. Nothing came to pick them clean because nothing comes to the wasteland and lives. The dead grass crunched under my feet, and I crossed my arms to try to keep in as much heat as I could in the cold. Halfway to the tower, I stopped, exhausted. I wrapped myself in the blankets I'd grabbed and found a dip in the ground with some dead bushes by it that would shield me from the worst of the wind. I curled up and drifted into a hellish and disjointed sleep. I dreamed of a man wrapped in bandages who only had one eye. He looked down at me and grinned an uneven smile. "This one, boys. This one will see the sky." He turned a light on me and I was blinded. As the world turned to white, the sound of stomping woke me up. I hastily looked in every direction but saw no one. The sound was coming from the other side of my short ridge. Peering up through the bushes, I saw a group of soldiers marching toward the tower. They looked tired. I waited till they passed and watched as their shrinking figures in the distance walked through a pair of wide doors at the base of the tower. I packed my things and followed. The doors had shut by the time I arrived at the tower base. The sleek, black walls of the tower looked impossible to climb. I could see my reflection in its sides and a big ring on either door. I pulled on one, and I found that I could, with all of my effort, slowly inch it open. Bit by bit, I pulled it open enough that I could slip in through the doorway. Panting, I looked around the tower. The room had a box in the middle with another door in it, and a tube leading up from the doors into the ceiling. It was odd, to say the least, but it wasn't the thing that truly captured my attention. No, that was the people. Around the walls stood people from the town, the ones who hadn't come back. They faced the walls, each wearing a thin garment that left their backs partially exposed where it fastened. Their heads were shaved, as were the rest of their bodies. They shifted lightly, but never took their eyes away from the patch of wall they were staring at. I walked up to one. I knew him. We'd played ball on the town square together as children. "Detroit!" I yelled. "Detroit, look at me! Come on!" "He won't reply to you," a voice said. I turned to face him. He was wrapped in bandages covering all of his face aside from one eye and his mouth. His teeth were uneven. I took a step backwards and ran into Detroit, who lost his balance for a moment and slammed his face into the wall. His nose began bleeding down his lip, but he stood right back up and stared at the wall again without complaint. "I admit, I didn't really think you'd come, but I suppose everyone has a breaking point, a point of no return. I suppose today's update was more extreme than I could ask someone to take." I looked him up and down. Who are you? Are you God?" His one eye blinked repeatedly, and then he laughed. "I thought we made sure there was no mention of God in the town. Did you come up with that on your own?" I shook my head. "I read it in a book," I spat out before covering my mouth. He just laughed again. "I suppose some of the security screwed the pooch. Couldn't help it happening eventually. Welcome to the tower. I wonder, do you know why you're here?" I shook my head. He grinned. "See all these people. They're your neighbors, right? And they hear something every day." His eyes danced around to all of them. "Order? Lick the floor?" The people around the room knelt down and began to lick the floor. They didn't stop. I ran over to them, trying to pull them up, but they shoved me away with all their force. You can't help them, Normandy. What do you think that noise is?" "I don't care. I know it hurts them." "Do you know what Wi-Fi is, Normandy?" I didn't. I'd never heard of it. I shook my head. "It's a signal that spreads out and can control these devices people call computers. I know you've never seen one, but we've been working on a way to control people right now. The techniques are in its infancy. The noise everyone in the town hears is a sort of software update for the brain. We experiment with new ones all the time, improving on it. It's science." I don't know what software is," I said, "but I know about science, and this is cruelty." It's not cruel. You know no other life, or you did. The only way we could make this experiment to truly be cruelty-free was to give you no other life, no other knowledge. You can't escape the borders of the world we built for you, and the eldest of you were only babies when they were first brought here. I'm nowhere close to the first person to run this experiment, but I think you'll be the one to finish it. This has been decades in the making. You can see the progress around you. They kept licking the floor, even while their tongues started to bleed. I don't see progress. Of course you don't. You can't hear the sound, which doesn't make any sense. If this is a test, you're the control specimen. We needed someone to not be affected, to compare, make sure our data was tilted by the other things happening. None of the other controls since I started ever came to the tower, though. You're the first. How exciting. Other controls? Well, yes. Throughout history, there were many. But yours isn't the only town. Come and see. He gestured to the box in the center of the room. I was tempted to hit him, but instead I got in. I wasn't sure why. The box lifted up, and soon we were rising into the sky. We reached the top of the tower and stepped out onto a big platform. There was a strange thing with a cross of metal sticking out from the top the man called a helicopter. Below me, I could see towns circling the tower in a ring. It was a marvel. Look at all of this. It's what we've built, and it must succeed. You haven't seen the world outside this habitat, the way people behave. That's true cruelty, and they must be controlled. You're cruel. You're torturing us, making us live a lie for the greater good. I looked around. No one was here. Just this man who thought he was above all of us. I rushed toward him and tackled him to the ground, my hand on his throat. He choked and pushed it away, but I squeezed out harder, and he squeezed out a word. Wait! I waited. And then he told me what I'm telling you. How he came to the tower from his town and found its caretaker. How he fought him, burning his body and leaving him scarred and bandaged. How he took over the tower for the greater good to finish their work. And then he took me in that helicopter, the one just over there, and took me to see this broken world. And it is broken. And I'll show you, too, if I live just a little bit longer, because the work here is almost done. And if you decide to take the job, you can throw me off the tower just like I did him. You can watch my body crumple to the ground, and it will feel good. But the work here must be done, and I hope you'll hear me out till my last breath when the noise stops. Thank you. This episode of Tales by the Blue Light was brought to you by oversized sunglasses. Have a face? Why worry about that when you can wear really big-ass sunglasses that cover up half of it? Wear them inside, outside, daytime, nighttime. If you wear them enough, everyone will forget you have eyes anyways, and that's pretty convenient. Big-ass sunglasses, because who wants eye contacts anyways? Now, we're going to end the show the way we always do. All right, so every month here we end off the show with a little live radio drama. Today, we have a little thing that might remind you of certain space adventures.
Run! Quick, we're almost out!
This is some rescue.
Pew, 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 pew.
This is some rescue. They're almost on us.
We'll be fine. Okay, that was a pretty big boom.
The bridge is collapsing. Run!
How did they...
Run, you dolt! Well, that was sure something.
You could even say that was a bridge too far.
Oh, shut up. Lord Friends can't be too far away. If we don't get moving, he'll be on us in moments.
You should have gotten moving quicker.
Lord Frez, Dark Warlord of 20 systems.
They have all been conquered by me, and soon you will be too. But first, I have a question for you.
Then ask it.
Conquer people say what?
What?
I got you good. You're defeated now by the Dark Lord Friends.
Oh, that's it. Give me my laser sword.
You mean your light...
Laser sword. I don't want a Lucasfilm lawyer over here.
I suppose that I must fight you.
On guard.
I've got to be able to help somehow. This can't... Wait, I've got it. Hey, Lord Friends. Dual Loser says what?
What?
Ooh, he got you good.
Damn! That was smooth. Next time, heroes, I won't be fooled so easily.
I didn't think winning would be so easy.
Best hero says what?
Let's just quit while we're ahead.
That's fair. Onward then. There's plenty of bad puns ahead.
That's all for tonight from the Blue Light. Come back next month, we'll be sure to offer you more tales of the fantastic. Into the darkest depths of your horror, the brightest flights of your fancy, and the biggest dreams of your future. From all of us here at the Blue Box Cafe in Elgin, Illinois, keep your light shining. There's plenty more to see.